Welcome back, everybody, to another RoboTaxi report, catching up on the last 2 weeks since we went over FSD data. Before we get started, I have before you the FSD Community Tracker set up by Elias Martinez. This can be your way to get involved if you have the FSD Beta to add to the growing data pool as we continue to monitor progress going forward. I'll include links to this dashboard and to his Twitter handle so you can get in touch with Elias and get signed up. That way you can start logging your progress on the FSD Data Tracker. The more people that sign up, the better overall picture we can paint for how the system is performing. So I encourage you to step up and get involved. Moving right along here, we're going to take a look at the RoboTaxi results, covering mostly the 21st to the 24th. Given the 25th or the 1st of March were spent in Vegas hanging out with friends, there's not a whole lot of RoboTaxi data to cover. But what is very obvious on the screen here is that we do in fact seem to be in a state of degradation. The first 2 days were a little alarming at a 31% success rate, but it's very obvious as you see an increase in trips, you'll see a decrease in the reliability. This is unfortunate, and it's really hard to say what might be the cause. I do have an idea, and I'll go over that in a moment. But as we're seeing now, there's definitely a pattern of regression from week to week. As always, I'm curious to see what happens as the sample size continues to grow. Next on the docket here, we're looking at city versus highway disengagements, and right toward the middle of the graph, you'll see the point where we left off on the last episode, looking at where 10.10.2 entered the field. Now that sharp uptick was quite alarming, but what was even more interesting was how drastically the disengagements increased while in Las Vegas. The tallest mountain here on the graph indicates the time spent while in Vegas and reflects how much of a difficult time the beta had dealing with Vegas streets. To be fair, it was less about the streets and more about the people. Now I've made some comments here and there about how the worst experience I've had in driving has to do with Las Vegas, and it looks like the beta tends to agree with me. We'll see that more reflected in our causation donut later on. But there's a couple of points here. First off, the roads in Vegas are immaculate. Anywhere I went with my friends, no matter what time of day, the roads were just clean. However, the way the highways are divided through its interchanges to go from one to another, and how the lane lines are depicted, especially going towards downtown near the Strip, the beta had an incredibly difficult time with proper lane selection. And that's what I hinted at when looking at the RoboTaxi results, as far as why there's such a drastic decrease in success. Where the system has gained an impressive amount of finesse and precise control over the car's actions itself, inversely, it seems to have lost a lot of the ability to properly select lanes and plan for navigational maneuvers. Vegas exploited this to the highest degree, as when you're down near the Strip or anywhere near where the driverless taxis are available, you'll notice a lot more reflectors on the road. These are laid out across intersections and all over in ways that seem a little strange until you realize the fact that these self-driving cars in Vegas use LiDAR. Having those reflectors throughout the street lined in the way they do helps the LiDAR systems perform better. That way there's less concern with their self-driving program. It's rather interesting with that fact that the computer vision was having a very hard time trying to figure out where its lane was because there were so many lane markers that the beta got tripped up quite a bit. Last point on this graph, you'll notice that right before the sharp uptick, it drops down quite a bit between the 23rd and 24th. And of course, on the return trip, you notice a massive decline in city street disengagements. While this should be obvious, I'll point it out anyway. Those points are due to the fact that several hundred kilometers were driven on the highway. It's only natural then to realize that your amount of disengagements per kilometer are going to severely drop until those large chunks of highway have finally been traversed and you're back in a more city street oriented area, which you'll notice at the very end of the graph when both city and highway are ticking in the upward direction. Now, taking a look at disengagements versus interventions, the trend from last episode seems to be consistent. While disengagements are undoubtedly going up, interventions do seem to be coming down. The last graph with 0 interventions you can really avoid paying much attention to, as again that was the return trip from Vegas, a lot of time on the highway and then arriving home and not really doing much else. What all these graphs continue to show, however, is that this is in fact not the way we want to go on disengagements. Finally here, we'll take a look at our donut of causation. As we've gotten more information, it's a bit more fleshed out as compared to last episode. While it's to be expected that navigation continues to be the greater majority of the graph, it's not by much. With more people on the road, walking around on the streets, and of course the myriad of people in Vegas, the human factor for disengagements would naturally go through the roof. And it's reflected here at nearly a quarter of the entire disengagement pool. Now, aside from that, everything else is pretty much sitting where it has for a long time. Unsafe dealing with excessive speed or maneuvers that might have you bumping a curb or getting you a little too close to a guardrail or just anything that makes you feel a little uneasy, unsafe. I did seem to encounter far less construction. But aside from the flip between human factor and construction, everything else sits in relatively the same place. Now, since returning from my road trip, my Model 3 has developed a very loud creaking and moaning sound whenever I turn the wheel or hit a bump, accelerate or brake for that matter. Come to find out, at 120,000 miles, my driver's side ball joints have just about had it. I'm now waiting for my car to be taken into service to get those replaced, and once that's done, I'll be able to continue with all the FSD beta testing action. Until then, for my own sanity, away from the excruciatingly loud squeaking and keeping my customers' confidence in mind, I won't be doing a whole lot of driving in the Model 3 until it's fixed. As of right now, Tesla's got me scheduled for an appointment a month out, and I'm seeing what I can do to have that done a bit quicker, because the idea of waiting 30 days to get back to collecting data and driving on the beta has me pulling my hair out. So for the time being, I'm using our Model Y for work, which, although I love that vehicle to death, it's a fantastic experience to drive. It doesn't have the FSD Beta, or the public version of FSD for that matter. So my RoboTaxi recordings, customer interactions, and RoboTaxi videos might be put on hold for a little bit, but do trust that they will come back as soon as I have that vehicle back on the road. Until then, I do have some videos I recorded while in Vegas with my buddies, putting the beta through the works, and just having a good time in general. So I'll try to get that content ready and out, that way the channel's got something going on while I wait for the car to get serviced. Thanks again for tuning into the RoboTaxi Report. If you have any questions or suggestions, please leave them in the comments. If you like what I do and want to spread this more data-driven approach to your friends and family, then please give me a like and share the video. I hear from a lot of you that this is much needed content that no one else is really doing, so I definitely love all the help I can get in spreading the word. Thanks again for your very valuable time, and I'll catch you all in the next video.